Hey listeners, Melanie here. I know it's a busy time of year, so I wanted to jump in and remind you to take extra care of yourself and your health as we move into 2026. And speaking of the new year, wouldn't it be amazing to make 2026 the year of no more kidney stones and no more surprise and traumatic ER visits? If you would like this, make sure to register for my free webinar at kidneystoneclass.com. On this free webinar, I'll walk you through the exact steps I've used to help hundreds of people stop their kidney stones. Seriously, my method to personalize kidney stone prevention has helped people with just one stone, hundreds of stones, genetic conditions that make stones more likely, and people who were told by their doctor that you are just a stone former and there's just no hope for you. And the best part is that the people I work with honestly usually end up following a less restrictive diet than when they were trying to do this on their own. And they were absolutely eating all of their favorite foods. Yes, a lot more than just once every couple months. You can incorporate your favorite foods into your diet every single day. I promise that there is hope to stop the terrible kidney stone cycle of pain, ER visits, and fear of eating. Head to www.kidneystoneclass.com to register for this 100% free class. Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the 125th episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. As always, I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. And today we are going to be talking a little bit about eating disorders and disordered eating in general. And we'll throughout the episode, hopefully you'll understand a little bit about why I'm talking about this on a kidney stone podcast. But I do think it's very, very relevant. And me and Mia will be talking about that later. So I would love to welcome Mia Greco to the podcast. So Mia, go ahead and introduce yourself. I'll let you take it away. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, thank you for having me, Melanie. As Melanie said, my name is Mia Greco, and I'm also a registered dietitian. I own a small private practice that primarily focuses on eating disorders and also weight-inclusive medical nutrition therapy. Meaning that when we work with our patients for any chronic diseases, including potentially kidney disease, we really focus on the sustainable health habits that they can accomplish through counseling with us rather than on weight. So we don't utilize weight as one of our measurements or goals. And we find that that's more sustainable for our patients, especially for patients who are recovering from eating disorders or have a history of disordered eating. We see patients from the age of 10 all the way up to, we've never seen a 99-year-old, but we would.
You could.
Yes.
Yes.
Because these disorders affect all ages, all walks of life, and it's a really fulfilling area to work in.
Yeah, awesome. In a previous life, before I fell into kidneys, I actually specialized in geriatric nutrition, and
Yeah.
there was discussions around how older adults absolutely have eating disorders, but it's something you don't think about. You think about young women, right? But that's such a
Yes.
great point that it can impact literally anyone of any age, of any gender, right? All of those things. So.
Yeah, in particular, we're seeing almost an uptick in postmenopausal women because there's a lot of things in society that tells postmenopausal women that they still have to maintain a certain body weight, so they get really rigid and start some disordered eating when they didn't even have a history of it before in their adolescence or
Mhm.
youth. So there's definitely an uptick in that area too, which is not something that you would often think would be associated with
Yeah.
eating
Yeah.
disorders.
I wonder, I'm just going out on a limb here. I wonder if that's also because regardless of if your weight or body size changes post-menopause, your body changes in other ways, and potentially
Yes.
in ways that generally society doesn't approve of.
Yep.
And so perhaps it's a way to kind of feel like you can control that. And
100%. That's
yeah.
absolutely, it's, the anti-aging rhetoric that really is targeted towards postmenopausal women, and they feel like they can have something under their control, and that definitely leads to disordered eating
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. What got you interested in this area? Have you always been like right out of school, weight inclusive? What's kind of
No,
your story there?
no, that's a great question. So, in school, as a dietitian, as you probably know, we don't spend a lot of time on eating disorders. We maybe have a little cursory mention in a class about the definitions of eating disorder, but nothing really solid. So I actually started in geriatric nutrition as well. I was in long-term care for a long time, and then I went up the route of more management, food service management, et cetera. Um, I got out of that because I was missing clinical. I really didn't feel like I had a passion for that. It was food service management. Um, and then it was actually my own kind of personal history with some disordered eating as I grew up. It was one of the reasons that I went to become a dietitian. I think this is common for a lot of dietitians, is that you have this desire to be thin and you feel like you have to be thin in order to for people to take you seriously. And so that drove my desire to be a dietitian. And then it continued to plague me. And then it was about, I want to say 2018 or 2019, right after I had my second child, that I discovered intuitive eating. And I'm like, this has been around since 1995. We did not learn about this in school at all. And so I just did a deep dive into every single thing I could find relating to intuitive eating, weight inclusive care, health at every size, which are all movements, that are really talking more about your health rather than this focus on weight.
Because they are
Um,
different. Just going to throw that out
yes,
there. They are not
yes.
equal.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as I discovered that and applied those principles to myself, I'm like, I need to let everybody know about this. I need to educate the world on intuitive eating and the impact it's made on my life. And I want other women to feel that freedom and find peace with food freedom, which is the tagline for my business. So I initially developed my business in 2020 with the thought that I was going to just do seminars, education, blogging related to intuitive eating, workshops, etc. As I continued to do that, I was getting asked, do you take eating disorder patients? I started getting credentialed with insurance. Then I recognized that I'm like, there is a need for this in my area. So then I started down the education path, getting supervision on, cases, making sure that I had all the education that I need, getting further continuing education, webinars, courses to make me a competent practitioner in eating disorder care. And
Mhm.
at first, I just took patients that had more disordered eating. And then as I developed more experience and worked with seasoned dietitians who were experts in the eating disorder space, then I took more and more eating disorder patients and then really built my practice around um, treating folks with eating disorders. So it wasn't exactly a straight line. I even
It
remember
never
saying
is.
in school, no, in school that I don't know if I could ever work with eating disorders. It's so much more psychological and it's not really about food.
Hmm.
And that is exactly what I love about it because
Yeah.
it's not necessarily about food.
No,
Uh,
no. I
so
often think that dietitians need to also have a major in psychology. Because like
yes,
that's so
yes.
much. I mean, food and like food science is obviously important in nutrition science, but there's so when you talk about actually food and eating, like you cannot separate the emotional and cultural, religious, like all of those different aspects of it.
No.
Nor should you, right? Yeah.
No, and
Hmm.
that's I think another deficit of our education is we get one class on counseling. And I think, understanding how to counsel a patient and make sure that they're confident in changing their behavior is a skill that it can be difficult for people. So again, and I've spent a lot of time actually taking um, continuing education related to therapy modalities. And again, I'm not a therapist and I don't practice outside of my scope, but learning those modalities to actually help my patients reach their nutrition goals has been it's been so beneficial. Probably some of the most valuable education I've ever had is based in those
For sure.
counseling modalities and therapy modalities.
For
So,
sure. I think that's something sometimes people don't realize about working with a dietitian. Like, we are not here to just tell you what to eat. In
nope.
fact, how terrible of a job would that be?
Yep. Yeah.
It's, I think truly, certainly, like for me, like, helping you understand which diet changes are going to help prevent kidney stones, right? That's obviously a huge benefit of working
Yep.
with someone like me, but helping like a dietitian, me or whomever it is going to help you actually make those changes, which is arguably even more important than knowing what to do, right? Because if you don't
Yes.
do it, it's not going to improve anything. So, we all know that behavior change is hard for many, many reasons. So it's, dietitians are not just food police. We don't just tell you what to do. We help you actually make those changes and work with you to figure out which changes are doable and realistic and make sense for you that feel right, right? So anyway, I digress.
That's and you're no, you're so right though, but that's the absolute key. Like we can educate and educate if someone isn't ready to change or doesn't know how to change or there's so many barriers to change and we're not building that rapport and that trust with them.
It's
They
pointless.
they can't, yes, it's
Mm.
100%
And
pointless.
arguably harmful,
Yeah,
honestly.
100%. And in
Yeah.
particular, I think with all dietetics, but in particular with eating disorders,
Oh, yeah.
there's definitely a different trust component,
Yeah.
and a longer relationship sometimes because it can be years of support
Sure.
with a dietitian or a treatment team.
Yeah. So I want to go back to a term that you mentioned that is not part of our outline, but I think it is incredibly important to define
Yes.
and kind of help people understand what that is. Can you help our audience understand what intuitive eating is?
Yes, 100%. So, intuitive eating is actually a set of principles that was developed by two dietitians in 1995, Evelyn Triboli and Elise Bresch. And the whole framework of intuitive eating is for folks to really make peace with food, and determine how to do that through kind of shedding some of those diet culture beliefs. So the principles are outlined, and I actually the first principle is rejecting diet culture, which means to really rethink how you view um, society's
Food
obsession with
rules?
fitness and
Mhm.
food rules and things like that. And then it focuses on more of attuning with your body. So honoring your hunger, knowing when you truly are hungry, honoring your fullness, truly knowing when you are full. What are the barriers to understanding when you're full? What distractions are there? Um, Talking about making peace with food. So giving yourself unconditional permission to eat all of the foods without this judgment or morality associated with foods. So there's no good or bad foods. Food's just food. Um, Discovering what foods you truly like, because oftentimes we're like, oh, I like this food. And no, you're only eating rice cakes because you were told that they were healthy. Do you truly like rice cakes? That's an ongoing joke with my patients. They'll be like, oh, I love rice cakes. I'm like, do you? Do you
Unless they're
really?
covered in peanut butter. Like, let's be real.
Yes. Yes, I'm like, do you? So that's again, truly finding what satisfies you and not having that shame around it. Challenging those negative thoughts in your head related to food and your body, shaming yourself for eating certain foods, etc. Respecting your body, respecting how it feels, respecting it with gentle movement, eating foods that feel good within your body, but you're not shaming yourself for eating other foods. Um, and then principle 10, the final culmination is honoring your health with gentle nutrition. So there's a lot of misconceptions about intuitive eating. It's, oh, dietitians are just telling you to eat whatever you want,
Eat
whenever you
cupcakes all
need.
the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, intuitively, I feel like eating cupcakes all the time. No, your body does not want that all the time. Um, but it is that unconditional permission in the beginning of intuitive eating that kind of scares people off because we're telling you, allowing you to
Cupcakes are
have that.
cool. Cupcakes are
Yes.
fine.
Eat your cupcakes because if you don't eat the cupcakes, then when you're around cupcakes, you're going to binge on the cupcakes. Or if you go on a strict diet, the minute that you're off the strict diet, what do? You gravitate towards foods that you weren't allowed to have. So it's making peace with those foods so they don't become this on this pedestal. And then you can eat in a more balanced, nuanced way based on your nutrient needs and based on what feels best in your body. Because eating cupcakes all day, you're not going to feel the best in your body. But never eating a cupcake, you're not going to feel the best in your body either, or mentally. So it's finding the balance and healing your relationship with food, coping with your emotions with kindness, and allowing yourself to really listen and tune into your mental needs for food and your physical needs for food.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a great summary. I know that there's a lot.
yes,
So thank you
yes,
for that high level overview, but there really is so much. And I will say that the book Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch is
yes,
very I think an easy read
yeah,
for non-dietitians and
yep.
dietitians included. So if you're at all interested, I'll link to the book in the show notes because it really is very good. And really gives you a great, I think it's very action oriented, right? Like if you
Yes.
can read it and have at least some idea of how to perhaps implement some of these principles in your life. So I'll put
And they
a
have a
plug for
great
that.
workbook as well. The
Yes, I have not
workbook,
seen that, but I know it exists.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and there's a fourth edition that just came out, oh, maybe a couple years ago now, but it's the Intuitive Eating Workbook and a second edition of the workbook. The fourth edition of the book just came out a couple years ago.
Mm.
So, second edition of the workbook, and it gives you exercises to guide you through each principle. And I actually use it with a lot of my patients and kind of give them homework out of it. But we jump around in the workbook based on what their needs are. So, it isn't a workbook that you have to work from front to back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a fantastic resource, and
Awesome.
my patients love working through that.
Cool. Cool. Well, this is a good segue because I think people might be
Yep.
thinking like Melanie, like, why do I need intuitive eating? Like, I don't have anorexia. I don't have bulimia. Like,
Yep.
I've never thrown up after I eat, or I've
Yep.
never starved myself. Like,
Mhm.
why, how is this relevant to me or even most of your listeners?
Yes.
So, can you help us understand a little bit about the difference between disordered eating versus
Yep.
eating disorder?
Yes. So as you mentioned, when we think of eating disorders, we think of anorexia, we think of bulimia or binge eating. But there is certainly a component, and that's the severe case, the diagnosis case, which is diagnosed by a medical professional or a therapist. But I think in our society now, everyone has a little bit of disordered eating.
I think it's
So,
virtually impossible to, especially as a woman, to be in our
yes.
world and not have just a touch of it.
Yep. So
Yeah.
when I describe disordered eating, it's where these food rules or these ideas about food impact the way you eat on a daily life. So again, low carb is a big thing. So you go on these diets, these fad diets that don't have a lot of evidence based on them for the sole purpose of losing weight. You say it might be to get healthy, but in reality, it's for the sole purpose to change the shape of your body or lose weight. And that impacts your life in a negative way. So it might not be that you are starving or throwing up, but let's say intermittent fasting. You're not going to a social event or you're not eating at a social event because it's outside of your window of eating, right? That is not a healthy, normal behavior. That's a disordered behavior. Or again, you're not eating carbohydrates because you're on a keto diet or um, those are all components of disordered eating. Of course, medically necessary diets to treat conditions are different, right? And you can also have a little bit more, be a little bit more liberal with those types of not restrictions, but requirements, nutrition requirements. So, like for example, I have patients who have hypertension, and their MDs often say, well, you have to completely eliminate sodium or something very blanket like
Mhm.
that. So again, that could lead into some very disordered eating or even an eating disorder. Then they won't eat anything with sodium. They're reading labels, they're not understanding. So if I'm working with somebody with hypertension, I'm like, yeah, sure, we can moderate our highest sodium foods, but what I really want you to focus on is what can you add to your diet? Let's add potassium-rich foods to your diet to help moderate the impact of the sodium and help lower your blood pressure. What are you getting enough sleep? Are you managing stress? All these other things that aren't like this very restrictive, rigid rules that make you miserable. You can manage chronic disease without eliminating all of your favorite foods. Diabetics, those those people with diabetes as well, they often are hearing blanket statements. Don't eat any white carbohydrates. When I work with those with diabetes, those with diabetes, We talk about how we can pair protein with carbohydrate foods, how we can make sure that we're getting adequate fiber, how we can moderate our carbohydrate intake without eliminating our favorite foods. Because again, when you're managing chronic disease, it can get into very obsessive disordered eating.
Mm-hmm.
So again, those are the main differences. Eating disorders, yes, have some clinical, diagnostic criteria, but disordered eating is rampant. I don't know a single person in my life that hasn't had some type of issue with restrictive eating patterns or yo-yo dieting or obsessing over food, counting calories, weighing food. All of those are unhealthy, obsessive, behaviors that don't add much to your life.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of a spectrum, right? Like an
Yes.
eating disorder would be kind of an extreme, I suppose, on either end, right?
Yep.
But if you're finding yourself swaying from just eating to fuel your body, do what
Mhm.
feels good, and these types of things, kind of all those intuitive eating principles, then that really
Yes.
can sort of probably be classified as disordered eating. Is there a screener that you're aware of for disordered eating that
Not for
people?
disordered eating. There's screeners for eating
Okay.
disorders,
Yeah.
but not anything
Okay.
official or evidence-based or,
Legit.
confirmed
Okay.
for disordered eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I uh want to mention now that I feel like this whole episode is going to be so useful for my audience specifically because I hear from many people daily, quite frankly, that after you have a kidney stone, you are so afraid to eat.
Yeah.
Because you never want to have a kidney stone again, understandably, right? It's the worst pain of your life many times. And and you go online and you read all this stuff that this stuff is bad, right? Or this doctor gives you this like low ox list and all this stuff is just bad. And you're like, oh my gosh, well, I can't eat anything. Like so many people are losing so much like dangerous amounts of weight, becoming
Yeah.
malnourished. So I feel like this is so relevant for a kidney stone audience because I find that many people are so afraid to eat. And that's why so much of my content really is about no, like kind of like Mia was saying, like, these are things that we can add to your diet to help prevent stones, right? Sure, we got to think about sodium. Sure, we got to think about not eating a ton of meat, like, sure. But also, if you were actually listening to our body and we're able to kind of break through all those food rules, you probably feel a lot better when you're not eating 80 ounces of steak a day, you know?
Yes.
Like, and adds broccoli to it. But anyway, so
Yeah.
that's kind of the connection that I wanted to make sort of
Yes.
explicitly, like because I find that it is an underappreciated. I mean, many things about kidney stones are underappreciated, but this is one aspect of it that I think really doesn't get talked about hardly at all.
Yeah. And again, just like I was mentioning before, with any chronic disease, yes, you must manage the condition. No one wants to get a kidney stone, but what can you do that you don't go down that disordered eating path? What can you do that you maintain a quality of life that doesn't limit all of your favorite foods, right? Oftentimes I'm talking about what we can add.
Right.
What can we add rather than what can we completely eliminate? Or how do you balance things? Like you said, we don't need to be eating 80 ounces of steak. We can still have animal protein, but let's talk about adding some plant-based protein that
Hmm.
may not
Mix it
be
up.
increasing uric acid as much. Let's focus on water. Adding water, I think, would be, and again, of course, you know the kidney stones much better than I do, but adding water to make sure that you have enough water so that
Mm.
that's an addition, right?
Right.
And then high oxalate foods, correct me if I'm wrong. I think if you pair those with calcium rich foods, that helps with
Yep.
it. So again, it's more about what can we pair it with? Like when I talk about diabetes education, pair your carbohydrates with protein
Hmm.
and fiber. So the same would go with kidney stone nutrition. Like you don't have to avoid all high oxalate foods, but if you pair them with calcium, that's going to be gentler on your
Hmm.
kidneys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are some of the risk factors for disordered eating in general?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think there is a little bit of a predisposition for disordered eating and eating disorders. Folks that are type A personalities, perfectionists, we see a little bit more in that. Some mental health disorders, OCD is actually a high risk factor for eating disorders because it's another fear and control mechanism. Um, I think social media is a huge risk factor, especially for our
Yeah.
young people, for our adolescents. There's a lot of negative messaging and a lot of content that you can find that actually promotes eating disorder behavior. Um, Having a family history of even substance abuse, or of course, someone else with an eating disorder, can certainly lend itself to be a higher risk factor. Unfortunately, being a female, granted, it affects both genders, but not equally. Being a female is certainly a risk factor for developing an eating disorder. Athletes are more prone to eating
Yeah.
disorders as well, because very much focused on their body. So I would, and of course, societal factors, family factors. If you are in a family that really values appearance and talks about appearance and, has some fat phobic tendencies or thought, they're really, fearful of themselves gaining weight, then they kind of project that onto their parents. We see, kids that grow up in those types of families are at a higher prevalence for
Yeah.
eating disorders as well.
Yeah, or even families that have this hyper fixation on only healthy foods. Like
Yes,
there's
100%.
a whole lot of conversation these days about food ingredients and how they're toxic and
Yep,
poison, which is absolutely not true. But when
yep,
you're telling a child constantly, this is poison, you don't like this, you don't
yes.
eat organic, like blah blah blah, like that I know is very much been shown to increase the risk of eating disorders.
100%. And not only restrictive eating disorders, but actually binge eating disorder, because a
Hmm.
lot of these children who are in these hyper-focused families that are hyper-focused on all clean ingredients or, your typical almond
Whatever that
mom.
means.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. They go on to hide food or sneak food. They go over to a friend's house and then they overeat at the friend's house because it's not available at their house. So on both sides of this spectrum, as far as eating disorders are concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, this, I'm biased because I have twin 3-year-olds. And so I'm very
Okay.
much into how to feed children, right? That's very much part of
Yes.
my personal life. But, I've definitely learned a lot myself about how important it is to, teach them that there's no good or bad foods and teach them to trust their bodies, right? They can stop eating when they're full. And, if only we could treat ourselves the same and with the same amount of grace, it would be so much better. But anyway.
100%.
Can you help us understand a little bit about that leap? Because a lot of people might be sort of surprised by this. And it's like, well, Melanie, you told me to like not eat too much salt. You're telling me to follow a restrictive diet, but like, how does that lead to disordered eating? Like, help us understand, like, maybe not how to do it well, because I feel like we've already kind of talked about how you can include gentle nutrition, but like, how do these super restrictive diets lead to disordered eating? Like, what's that link there?
Okay. I think it's multifactorial, but oftentimes, when you're doing a super restrictive diet, be it for kidney stones or just for weight loss, right? There's a certain point in time where you start to get quote unquote results. Those are the desired results that society expects from you. So let's say you're on a restrictive diet related to kidney stones, okay? And then inadvertently you start losing weight. You get compliments, you
Positive.
get validation regarding that weight loss, and that can be a very slippery slope for people. So then all of a sudden they're getting this validation. They're like, "Oh, what I'm doing is working. Let me restrict further and see if it can work
Better.
more."
Hmm.
Right. Let's see if I can lose more weight. And that kind of causes a snowball effect. And then they get so stuck in these patterns and they need that control of their body that it just continues to be more restrictive. It continues to focus on eliminating more foods. Again, eating only organic or not eating anything with food dyes or not eating anything that's processed or ultra processed and becoming more and more rigid until then you're skating on thin ice. Closer and closer to
Hmm.
disordered eating, which you're already there, but into an eating disorder.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's, so I have nothing else to add.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's why it's so important to really be mindful of where you're getting your nutrition information from as
Mhm.
well, because in general, certainly not all, but I think in general, dietitians are going to be way more aware of this whole thing. And that's, I certainly, as someone who puts a lot of public health information out there, right? A lot of educating the public. I'm very mindful of all of this stuff and the language that I use, the way that I present information. I would never say something is toxic unless like it would actually kill you, like arsenic or something, right? Like,
Right.
I'm um because I do think that it's very, very easy, especially you mentioned social media in a world where we're inundated with information and a lot of times from people who don't have an actual education, who don't know what they're talking about, not only in what they're telling you to do, but also the way that that information is presented.
Yes. Yep. And
Yeah.
again, dietitians have a very hard job of combating all of the misinformation that is out there. It's my least favorite part of the job. But then people are like, "Oh, well, I'm so glad you're telling me what is real because if I listened to everybody, there would be no food left for me to
Literally nothing
eat. There's
left.
nothing left."
Yeah. Well, it's
Exactly.
yeah, it's so eye-opening. Like there is not a single food. Like if I talk about bananas, how they're so great for you. Or
Yep.
if I talk about beans or I talk about onions or like literally I'm looking at like what's in my kitchen, right?
Yep.
Literally anything, I will get hate. Like literally there's
Yes.
not a single food I can talk about online in my blog or in my social media and there's going to be someone that has a problem with it. Usually well-meaning. Sometimes people are mean. Well, a lot of times people are mean, but most of the time it's not, it's just literally like, well, I thought I couldn't eat it. Someone today said, well, I can't eat lentil soup, right? Like someone said I couldn't eat lentil soup. Like, what's wrong with lentil soup? So,
Right.
um, yeah, it's just, it's sad. And that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So I imagine a lot of people may be thinking perhaps that they themselves are engaging in some of
Yeah.
these disordered eating practices, but potentially also members of their family or friends that are doing this perhaps quite significantly. What are some red flags that you might be looking out for, from people that you know or people in your life?
Sure. I think one of the biggest red flags, obviously, the most dramatic red flag is sudden weight loss, right? You see somebody and they suddenly have lost quite a bit of weight. Another huge red flag is avoiding social situations, right? They're not coming to the parties because they don't want to engage or be forced, et cetera, to eat the food that's provided, bringing their own food to social events outside of having an allergy or something of that nature, but they're bringing their own food to events and only eating that food. um, Not eating dinner with people, so for like adolescents, kids starting to go to their rooms and saying, okay, I'm going to take my dinner up to their room. I say that that's a big red flag for parents to
Mhm.
watch out for, because again, are they truly eating? Are they hiding the eating disorder? Eating disorders are very sneaky. They don't want to be found out. So it's again a lot of that hiding, sneaking behavior, or an obsession with
Health.
yes, health.
I'm using air quotes here for people who can't see
Yes,
me.
yes.
Yes.
With health. So if an adolescent who used to love to have Cheetos once in a while, and all of a sudden, they're not asking for those to be purchased, or they're asking for rice cakes. And I hate to make fun of rice cakes, but things of that nature, then a parent should be on alert that, things again, some kids can just decide that they don't want to eat as many Cheetos. But if it's a persistent and pervasive pattern with a lot of different foods that they used to enjoy, like they used to love your homemade spaghetti and meatballs, and now they're asking you to make zucchini and meatballs, on a consistent basis, or you notice that they're avoiding entire food group. And I pick on carbs because that's one that's very prevalent right now. They'll start with not eating carbs, or you're going out as a family for ice cream and they're not opting to
Hmm.
join in with that family experience when they used to love.
Yeah. And I
You know,
think, it's not that any one of these things is bad or not
no,
getting ice cream once is bad,
right,
obviously. But it's when
exactly.
it's happening a lot and you're noticing
Yes,
maybe lots of these different behaviors, that's
yes.
when perhaps some red flags should be raised.
Sure. Yeah. Sometimes you don't want ice cream, but if it's a consistent, pervasive thing with some of these other things, or this real focus, or again, body shaming themselves, or starting for adolescent girls, often starting to wear baggier clothes to hide their bodies. And again, I know the style now for a lot of girls
It's
is
true.
baggy sweatshirts, but
Yeah.
some of that behavior, and depression and other mental health concerns are going to be a red flag, as well. Not saying that all depression and eating disorders are linked, but again, monitoring for social interaction, in particular around meals, I think is good
Yeah.
um, to take notice of.
Any tips for bringing this up with someone that you notice? Because that's a pretty touchy topic.
It is a touchy topic, and I guess it would really depend on how your relationship is with them. So for parents with children, that's a little bit more cut and dry. You notice these behaviors in your children, you're going to have a very candid, honest conversation with them. Expressing that you've noticed some differences in their behavior, what's going on. Let's get you to see a therapist first and foremost, and then see if there's any more support needed. And again, making sure that you're not commenting on good or bad foods or commenting on their body or kind of
Other
buying
people's
in
bodies. Hmm.
100% or your own body. That's a
Hmm.
huge thing for moms is that if you're shaming your body in front of your children, then they see that and then they're like, oh, well, what about my body? Like
Hmm.
the best role model we have for our children is ourselves and being kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think a parent-child relationship, like I said, is a little bit more cut and dry. You have that direct conversation. You need to support your child regardless. When it comes to other relationships, that's a little bit trickier. Like if you notice that your friend is engaging in these behaviors, um, I think if you're a good friend and you have a good relationship with that friend, having an open, honest conversation and expressing concern, but then they have the autonomy to do what they want with that information. So it's a little bit more painful. Parent-child relationship, you get them that support. You make sure that you're involved with them and making sure that
Hmm.
they have the help that they need. Friendships are a little bit more tricky. You might lose that friend. That eating disorder is very sneaky. They don't want to stop their behavior, so they might distance themselves from you as that friend who kind of called out that behavior and is not validating that they're doing a good thing for themselves.
Hmm.
Um, Partners, that's another one. Again, that might be a tricky situation, but again, that should be a trusted person. And it's, similar to friends, except a little bit deeper relationship. Um, if you have children together, that again, that's a whole nother level of trying to motivate that person to get better for the sake of the family. Um, so it's very hard conversations, not easy conversations to have, and you have to approach it with kindness and concern, but not trying to force them into anything, but giving them that autonomy to choose if they want to get help or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that approaching it with concern. I feel like that's perhaps the best thing. Like, it's not like, oh, like I've noticed that you lost a ton of weight. Like, no,
Right.
like I'd say, how are you? Right? Like,
Yes.
hey, like let's schedule a dinner. How are you? Right? Like,
Yes.
are you feeling okay? Are you, like, are you doing these things? I've noticed you haven't been coming out as much lately, or I noticed that you haven't been reading as much. Your Goodreads account hasn't been as
Yes.
active. Like, what's going on? Right? Or just like
Yes.
whatever it is, right? Like, just I've noticed some things are off. Like, what's going on? Um, I
Yeah,
feel
you
like
don't
that's,
come out and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I would say that's probably a much better way to come up, honestly, to bring up any conversation, but
Sure.
especially something like this, you know?
Yeah, you don't go and accuse someone,
Right.
right? You're not like, oh, you've lost weight, you must have an eating disorder, or are you anorexic or something? Like all those,
Right.
those just accusatory type things. It's definitely like we talked about, concern and support.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe, I suppose, going to someone else in that person's life, right? Like if
Yes.
it's, my mind just went to kids automatically, but then going to that person's parent, obviously, right?
Yes.
Or maybe that person's, if it's your friend and you feel like that's not going anywhere, maybe going to their partner or
Yep.
something like that.
Yep.
Not to talk behind their back, but, it's obviously coming from a place of concern.
Of course, of
So,
course.
yeah.
Oftentimes, with adolescents, it's sometimes another concerned parent or teacher that
Hmm.
brings it to the attention of the parent because the parent is just not that they're not involved in their children's life, but they've got so much other things going on and they're
Yes.
not aware,
Hmm.
necessarily. So
Right, right. Awesome. Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Before we wrap up, do you have any final things or things you feel like we missed that you really want to make sure that we say?
I think just supporting people and having the knowledge around disordered eating and eating disorders is important, and giving yourself grace and recognizing that you don't have to um, be your smallest self to be worthy of love and health and all of those things, and that focusing on every single morsel that you put into your body is more detrimental to your health than enjoying the variety and pleasure that food brings.
Yeah. Great final words.
Thank you.
All right. So, where can people find you and connect with you if they would like to after this podcast?
Sure. So my practice name is Olive Branch Nutrition. I do have a website. It's www.olivebranchdietitian.com. Dietitian spelled, well,
Not
your
with a
audience knows
C,
how to spell
not with a
dietitian. Yeah,
C.
I always have to ask people, tell people that. And then also email hello@olivebranchdietitian.com. Also on Facebook, Olive Branch Nutrition, and Instagram at Olive Branch Dietitian.
Okay.
We're
Awesome.
on
And I'll
other
link to
social
all of
media
that in
too.
the show
Yeah,
notes so people can
thank
easily
you.
find you.
Of course.
Do you work, so you're, I don't know if we mentioned it, but you're based in the outside of the Chicago area. Do you only work with people in Illinois or do you work with people across the country?
Actually, we're licensed in a few states. So Illinois, Wisconsin, Washington State, Maryland, Arizona, which is a non-licensure state, so we can practice there. So those, oh, and Iowa. I almost forgot Iowa. So in the general Midwest, a little bit on the West Coast, a little bit on the East Coast. But we're always obtaining new license so we can expand our reach
Yeah.
across the country.
Yeah, there's also some really exciting stuff happening with dietitian licensure. So hopefully that
Yes,
will
I hope. Yeah.
hopefully that will make all of this a lot easier for all of us. But anyway,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much, Mia. It was so lovely chatting with you. This was such an important conversation, and I am sure that the audience will get so much from it. So, thank you so much for being here, and maybe we'll see you again on the podcast sometime.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.